But this shot, for example, could easily be high-volume dynamite. That looks like Hiroshima, but it looks like it's been carpet bombed. Check out this image of Rotterdam. Was that a nuclear bomb? Now compare it to this image of Hiroshima. Actually, this isn't Hiroshima, it's Tokyo after firebombing in 1945. If you accept that FDR might have had foreknowledge of the bombing at Pearl Harbor, maybe you might want to leave room for the possibility that his propaganda machine might have created the myth of atomic bombs. There's no question that the powers that be have ballistics with tremendous explosive capacity. But this shot, for example, could easily be high-volume dynamite. And what are we looking at here? Take a look at this house again. Whatever was strong enough to blow it to smithereens wasn't strong enough to even shake the camera. And look how high up the camera position is. Are we looking at another model? Now look at this bus and this car. Whatever's blowing them up is not moving the camera. And this building seems to blow up from the inside. Everything gets blown every which way except for the camera. Except look in this shot, it seems to tilt up a little bit. Now this is one of my favorites. Watch the two guys behind the glass. Who's filming them? Isn't he being exposed to all that rocket fuel? Anyways, I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. If you're hell-bent on believing that they can blow up the world at the push of a button, then go ahead. But next time you hear a politician justifying the invasion of a country based on the fact that they supposedly have weapons of mass destruction, realize that they're not only lying about the other country supposedly possessing weapons of mass destruction, they also may be lying about the very existence of weapons of mass destruction.
Do North Korea have nukes? Are the Iranians still trying to build a nuclear bomb? Are we perpetually on the brink of thermonuclear war? The governments and the elites that control them have such a history of lying to the public, can we not assume we are not being told the truth? From the Titanic to 9/11, the public have been fed one pantomime after another. Can we not be forgiven for questioning nuclear weapons, perhaps their tallest of tales? All this time has passed and still no nuclear war. This is excused with the notion of mutually assured destruction, the idea that all supposedly nuclear-armed nations fear their own nuclear destruction too much to try to destroy another, and so we live in perpetual nuclear peace in a world of continuous conventional war. What if all war was a fraud, the banking elite controlling all sides, all playing for a draw, not trying to defeat their enemy but controlling their populations with fear? Why not forget the weapons and simulate it all on computers?
It's a bluff, John. Call it off. No, it's not a bluff. It's real.
Hello, General Barringer. Stephen Falcon.
Mr. Falcon, you picked a hell of a day for a visit.
General, what you see on these screens up here is a fantasy, a computer-enhanced hallucination. Those blips are not real missiles, they're phantoms.
Jack, there's nothing to indicate a simulation at all. Everything's working perfectly.
But does it make any sense?
Does what make any sense?
Wouldn't it be cheaper and easier to pretend? Why spend all that money on weapons you know you're never going to use? When convincing your enemy or your public you've got them achieves the same ends. Would the elites want to endanger themselves with nuclear weapons considering what they can supposedly do? Do they want to destroy the world and hide underground in bunkers? Or is that just what they want you to think? They haven't done it yet, and I wouldn't hold your breath. Why have lots of nukes pointed at each other? Why not just have one very big one each, powerful enough to destroy the world? Would it not offer the same protection? If nuclear weapons exist, why do they tell us? Why aren't they kept secret? Surely it would be the best way to prevent them from proliferating. They are so secretive about all their other weapon systems, like HARP, directed energy weapons, railguns and coil guns and rods of God or kinetic weapons. Real or not, nuclear weapons are weapons of propaganda, designed to fill the public with fear, through which the elites control the population of the world.
Is this a game, or is it real?
What's the difference?
Oh, wow.
German scientists had split the atom by bombarding uranium with neutrons, which caused instability in the uranium nucleus. During this split, mass was lost and was converted into kinetic energy. They had discovered fission, and with it opened a Pandora's box.
If each of those neutrons goes into another uranium nucleus and causes fission, then the first fission has led to more than 2 fissions in the next generation, and you can see that each successive generation has many more neutrons, and this causes an explosive chain reaction.
If 2 masses of highly fissionable uranium in the form of a sphere and a plug could be brought together with sufficient speed inside a bomb, an exponentially increasing chain reaction with explosive force would result.
It was known that the nucleus of one form of uranium, isotope 235, would split when it absorbed a neutron. When this happened, energy was released and more neutrons were created that struck and split other nuclei. When it happens continuously, it's known as a chain reaction. No one knew at the start how much fissionable material was needed to support an explosive chain reaction. That volume would be known as the critical mass. Another element, only discovered in late 1941 by Berkeley nuclear chemist Glenn Seaborg, also had the properties to explode in a chain reaction.
And we immediately saw no one's mind was on anything but how can this be used for war? It gradually became clear. It's quite possible to make an explosion from this.
It was this concern that led refugee German physicist Leo Szilard to reveal that possibility to the U.S. government. Together with Albert Einstein and Edward Teller, he composed a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt. It told of a terrible possibility. Germany had the talent and the knowledge to research and develop an atomic weapon. Delivering the letter to Roosevelt on their behalf was economist Alexander Sachs, a friend of Szilard and economic advisor to the president.
Let's take a look at this letter. It may become possible to set up a nuclear chain reaction in a large mass of uranium. This new phenomenon would also lead to the construction of bombs, and it is conceivable, though much less certain, that extremely powerful bombs of a new type may thus be constructed. However, such bombs might very well prove to be too heavy for transportation by air.
Major General Leslie R. Groves, the man responsible for the Pentagon, was placed in charge of the project.
The project was massive. to design and build a device that existed only in theory, from material that didn't exist in any quantity, under unprecedented secrecy.
Fermi tackled the first obstacle to the bomb, the question of whether or not a sustained chain reaction could be induced in a uranium reactor. Without the successively doubling power of the chain reaction, a bomb would be an impossibility.
Fermi was one of the few scientists who was talented both in theory and in practice. He loved getting his hands dirty. Leo Szilard was the antithesis of Enrico Fermi. Szilard usually slept late. He soaked in the bathtub to get fresh ideas.
While in the bathtub, Szilard remained focused on the competition, the German bomb effort. He convinced scientists in the U.S., whose community thrived on openness, to censor their own papers, so that they would not inadvertently help the Germans.
This would also facilitate the hoax. The nuclear bomb hoax thrives on secrecy, and in fact, one of its main purposes is to create an apparent need for extreme secrecy within the government and the industrial military complex. One of the main purposes for the creation of the myth of nuclear weapons is the rise of the secret services. Nuclear weapons provide a perfect excuse for governments to keep secrets and tell lies to their populations. As a result of the nuclear weapon myth, the population demand it. Without nuclear weapons, there is little or no justification for keeping secrets and telling lies to the population, or for the organizations charged with that task.
But sometimes we forget that security violations can be dangerous business too. If classified information about this test mission fell into enemy hands, the consequences could be disastrous to all of us, individually and collectively as a nation. Security is only common sense. Don't take chances. Avoid loose talk. Safeguard classified information. Report security violations at once. Prompt action may prevent a minor incident from developing into a serious one. Avoid writing about classified material in letters home. Be sure you're secure. Don't be careless.
I hate a careless man.
As the U.S. bomb effort was taking its first tentative steps, news that the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin had begun actively pursuing uranium research rippled through the American scientific community. It would take nothing short of a disaster to move the president to take decisive action, and a disaster was not far off.
Pearl Harbor plunged the United States into war. The first self-sustaining chain-reacting pile was successfully operated by Enrico Fermi. Fermi's success brought intense efforts between government and the private sector, creating huge industries for uranium separation in the town of Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and for the production of plutonium in Hanford, Washington.
They were trying to demonstrate that the fission process could be harnessed by launching a sustained chain reaction in uranium. They built the first primitive reactor in a squash court beneath the stands of the university's football stadium. The reactor consisted of a pile in which a fission reaction could be initiated and controlled.
They did it by piling layers of graphite and then embedding balls of uranium, so that when the neutrons started flying through, they would be slowed by the graphite, collide with the uranium, release more neutrons, and those neutrons would continue in the chain reaction pattern.
This momentous achievement, only detectable by a Geiger counter, meant that the fission process could be sustained. Nuclear energy could be released in a controlled way, as in a reactor, or perhaps cataclysmically, as in a bomb.
This in no way indicates that an explosive chain reaction is achievable.
To head up the installation, Groves, an expert judge of men, chose a most unlikely candidate, J. Robert Oppenheimer. A gifted physics professor, Oppenheimer had a reputation for being temperamental, perhaps not suited to a highly stressful assignment.
It was advised that Oppenheimer would be a disaster. People told him that Oppenheimer couldn't run a hot dog stand.
Oppenheimer was a fascinating and complicated man. Fundamentally, he seems to have had some of the qualities of an actor. He was different things to different people.
Oppenheimer drew luminaries like Enrico Fermi, Hans Bethe, and Edward